last week of what to do when you don't know what to do. The name is about as long as the series, but it has been great. In this series, we've been journeying through the life of Joseph, whose story is found in Genesis. And his story is a wild one that oftentimes he had no idea what he was going to do next. Now, earlier on in the series, we talked about how Joseph knew he was his dad's favorite, rubbed it into his brothers' faces. Joseph also had dreams where he was in charge of the whole family, and then told his older brothers about it. And like we said, he is not exactly the most self-aware guy. And since Joseph was super annoying, his brothers plotted to kill him, which seems like kind of an overreaction, but instead they saw a group of travelers making their way through town, and they decided to make a little bit of money by selling Joseph into slavery. Now, as we have gone on with the rest of the series, we've covered how Joseph is a slave in Egypt, he was a slave in prison in Egypt, and Joseph, as that man, was interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, the most powerful man in all of Egypt. That eventually got Joseph placed in charge of all of Egypt. He was second in command to Pharaoh. Not a bad outcome for a kid who was sold into slavery by his brothers. So that's a lot of stuff, but here in the story is where we have our plot twist. After Joseph was given second in command responsibilities, there was a food shortage or a famine in the land where his family lived. So Joseph's dad, Jacob, sent his brothers to Egypt to ask for food because they were starving. At this point in the story, Joseph's family thought he was dead. Of course they did. They sold him into Egypt, and they weren't expecting to see him in Egypt alive. And they definitely weren't expecting to be asking him for food. So when they arrived in Egypt, they saw Joseph, not knowing that it was Joseph, and a huge drama unfolded. You can read that interaction in the 8 chapters between 42 and 50 in Genesis, but trust me, you're going to want to go and read it because it is a crazy story. It's like soap operas in the middle of the day. Tons of backstory, drama, fights, all of this stuff wrapped into 8 chapters. But we're picking up in Genesis chapter 45. It says this: Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But the brothers were not able to answer him, because they were terrified at his presence. Now, I want you to imagine that tension and all of the emotion of that moment. Joseph is face to face with the people who tried to kill him, his own brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery. Those same brothers were ironically asking Joseph for his help. This is the ultimate get what's coming to you moment. It was set up flawlessly. Everything was perfectly set up, and payback was dropped in Joseph's lap. He could have refused them food. He could have had them thrown into prison just to give them a taste of their own medicine. He even could have had them killed. He was second in command of all of Egypt, and they were certainly willing to kill him at the beginning. Whew, that's a lot. So let's pause real quick. What would you have done? I mean, you don't have to say it out loud, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. For me, it would have been a heck of a decision. I probably wouldn't have killed them, but throwing them into prison for a couple months just to make up for the 2 years that I was stuck in prison as Joseph, yeah. What would you have done with all that power when the people who hurt you tremendously were standing in front of you? Honestly, I said what I thought I might do. To be completely honest, I have no clue. But here's what we see as the story continues. Joseph calls to his brothers and says, "Hey, y'all, come over here real quick." They were just racked with terror at the moment because of everything that's happened. But then this is what Joseph says: "I'm your brother Joseph, the one who sold you, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Now, there's really only one reason that Joseph responded the way that he did. He didn't try and get payback because he had already let go of this idea of revenge. He had already done all the hard work of forgiveness. So how do we know that? Because Joseph could look in the eyes of the ones who caused him all this incredible grief and care about how they were feeling. When Joseph said, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here," he was acknowledging their wrong and his hurt without creating more hurt. Only a healed person could even come close to doing that, and only someone who had forgiven could do this. Joseph chose forgiveness over payback. And what we see in that moment is he had the greatest opportunity for revenge. Somewhere between being sold into slavery and being reunited with his brothers and his family, Joseph did the hard work of giving his hurt to God and allowing God to be central in this healing. That's why Joseph was quick to acknowledge God in the area where his brothers had caused him the most pain. It didn't make what his brothers did okay, and it didn't make Joseph's pain any less. It just took the real pain and the real hurt and no longer put it at center stage. It put God there instead, and it made forgiveness possible. Forgiveness was not only for Joseph's brothers, it was freedom from Joseph's own pain as well. I mean, Joseph went to tell his brothers, "Go get the family, go get my father, bring them to Egypt," because the famine, it was going to keep going. And without making that move of bringing the family to Egypt, his family would have suffered. But then this is something that Joseph does that just shocks everyone. Verse 45, or chapter 45, verse 15. He kissed all of his brothers and wept over them. And afterwards, his brothers talked with him. That may be the only thing better than payback, is reconciliation. This is where we see God do the impossible in a relationship to bring peace when there had only been hurt. And this was all because of forgiveness. Now, when it comes to other people hurting us, we also have the opportunity to choose something better than payback. In fact, here's a really easy way to remember it. When you don't know what to do, pursue peace instead of payback. When you pursue peace, you fight for the relationship. In other words, you can fight to win or to be right or to make your point, or you can fight the urge of payback and pursue peace. But you can't do both. Joseph preserved his relationships with all of his brothers because he chose peace. And he was only able to do that because he fought for forgiveness. And he was only able to forgive with God's help. Joseph didn't have some superpower that allowed him to do this. He just had the determination to do the hard work that peace required, and an understanding of God at work in his situation. Which means that you and I, we can do this too. When you pursue peace, you lay down your right for payback. I mean, you let go of the revenge. You say goodbye to this desire to get even. I mean, let's be real. Getting even is what a lot of us want. But instead, we choose the path for forgiveness, and we choose God's story of reconciliation instead of our story of payback and revenge. This is a lot easier said than done, and something you may have to work for on the daily. I have to work for on the daily. But the ultimate benefit is really for us. You not only have peace with the person that hurt us, but you have peace inside of you. Now here's why this is complicated. Because what's happened to you isn't what happened to Joseph. In fact, I could tell you a dozen stories and none of them would be exactly like yours. Maybe you spent this whole time wondering, do you always have to reconcile? What about when this thing is toxic? And what if you're the one who did the hurting? Each of us has a unique situation and complicated situations, and figuring out what to do to pursue peace isn't always easy. That's why your small group is so important. That's why we're coming back on September 13th. We want you to talk about what this looks like for you in your real life, with your friends, in your family. Now, as we wrap up today and as we wrap up our series, think about what you have the power to do when it comes to pursuing peace. What do you need to decide? Who do you need to forgive? What offense do you need to bring to God? We can only take care of what we can do, but that puts a lot of responsibility on us to be able to answer these questions. We can't control the actions of other people, but what we can do is control our actions. Because if we can answer those questions, what do we need to decide? Who do we need to forgive? What offense do you need to bring to God? If we can answer those questions in our lives, He can do incredible things in our story. Even things that we may not even be able to imagine yet. So that's it. Week 5. We've gotten through 5 weeks of Joseph's life. It has been awesome and amazing. But here's what's coming up. September 13th, we are coming back in person, the full youth ministry. If you're wondering what that's going to look like, go check out the chapelpr.com/plan. All that stuff is going to be on there, and we are so excited to get back. We're starting a brand new series too. It's going to be great. Thank you guys for joining us. Hit all the bells and stuff, because we're going to keep making videos even when we're back in person. So just be on the lookout for those. Anyways, have a great rest of your day, and see you guys later.